I still remember the very first time I played NES Probotector. I didn't know anything about its connection to Contra or why the characters were robots instead of commandos. All I knew was that the cartridge looked cool. Two robotic soldiers, metallic armor gleaming, lasers firing in every direction. It felt like something completely different from the other games I had on my shelf. I was young, and the idea of playing as a robot fighting alien forces made me feel like I was stepping into a sci-fi action movie. My setup back then was nothing fancy. A chunky old CRT TV, the kind that always hummed quietly in the background. The NES was slightly finicky. You had to blow into the cartridge even though everyone said you weren't supposed to. When the game finally booted up and the Probotector title theme kicked in, I felt a rush of excitement I can still recall today. That theme wasn't just music, it felt like a call to battle. Sharp, dramatic, and absolutely determined to get your heart pumping. Booting the game up today, decades later, was a strange mix of nostalgia and rediscovery. One part of me remembered exactly how chaotic and intense it could be. Another part of me wondered whether it could possibly hold up in an era where modern games have frame-perfect controls, fluid animations, and endless accessibility options. And suddenly, I found myself asking the question at the heart of this video. Is NES Probotector still enjoyable for modern gamers? Once I got past the nostalgia and started actually playing again, the first thing that hit me was just how fast and responsive everything is. Probotector doesn't warm you up. There's no tutorial, no opening cutscene, no gentle introduction. The game throws you into the action immediately. Enemies shooting from above, soldiers rushing from the edges of the screen, turrets placed exactly where you don't want them to be. Every second matters. Even by modern standards, the controls feel tight. You aim in 8 directions, your robot moves with precise steps, and there's a sense of weight without sluggishness. It's funny because so many people think old games are stiff, but Probotector is incredibly fluid once you get the rhythm. It wants you to react quickly, shoot deliberately, and memorize enemy patterns the way you would in a modern bullet hell game. And that's one of the things that really separates Probotector from a lot of modern shooters. There's no randomness here. Enemy placements follow rules, their patterns follow logic. When you die, you almost always know exactly why. When I was a kid, I thought the game was unfair. Now I see that it was actually teaching me how to pay attention to every spawn, every bullet, every boss pattern. Revisiting Probotector also reminded me how unique the robotic character designs truly are. By changing the protagonists from human commandos to robotic soldiers, the game takes on a completely different identity. The metal footsteps, the mechanical firing sounds, the way explosions echo across the screen, it gives Probotector this colder, more sci-fi feel compared to Contra's gritty military style. For a kid who grew up obsessed with cartoons about transforming robots and futuristic machines, this was the closest I could get to piloting a battle mech. But one thing modern gamers will notice immediately is the difficulty. Probotector is unforgiving. One hit and you're gone. Lose all your lives and you start over. There are no checkpoints, no quick saves, no difficulty sliders. It demands absolute focus, and sometimes that can feel harsh, especially if you're used to games that offer generous checkpoints or optional accessibility modes. Yet strangely, that harshness also makes the experience more rewarding. Just like in modern tough games, Elden Ring, Cuphead, Dead Cells, victory feels meaningful because the game refuses to hand it to you. When you finally clear a level that once seemed impossible, the satisfaction hits hard. And Probotector offers this cycle of failure and improvement in a pure mechanical form. It's not hiding anything. It's not holding anything back. It's just you, the controller, and the next wave of enemies. The boss fights still stand out as some of the most memorable parts of the game. Giant alien faces, mechanical monstrosities, organic creatures fused with machinery. It's weird, imaginative, and surprisingly intense for NES hardware. Even by today's standards, the boss patterns make sense. You study them, learn them, and react. It feels timeless because the design is readable and fair, even if the difficulty is high. Revisiting these bosses made me realize how much modern games owe to titles like Probotector. Pattern recognition, timing, spacing, all of it was here, decades ago, in an 8-bit package. And then there's the atmosphere. This was something I didn't fully appreciate as a kid. Probotector has an identity: cold, metallic, alien, and relentless. The soundtrack supports that mood perfectly. Each level theme carries a sense of urgency, pushing you forward without overwhelming you. Even with NES limitations, the composers created something powerful. Today, hearing those melodies feels like opening a time capsule filled with excitement and tension. But let's talk about visuals. For an NES game, Probotector looks sharp. The backgrounds are clear, the sprites are distinct, and the difference between enemies and terrain is always visible. That might sound simple, but visual clarity is something a lot of retro games struggled with. Some NES titles blend backgrounds and enemies in messy ways, but Probotector avoids that. The color palette is chosen carefully to highlight threats, create contrast, and keep the action readable. This is one area where the game continues to shine. Even modern players will appreciate how clean and intentional every frame looks. Is it perfect by today's standards? No. The difficulty spikes can feel brutal. Losing your weapon upgrades when you die can be frustrating, and the lack of in-game explanation might confuse younger players. But all these flaws are part of its identity. Probotector is not trying to be a modern game. It is a product of its time, built with an arcade mindset. Challenge the player, demand improvement, reward mastery. And honestly, I find that refreshing. When I ask myself whether Probotector is still enjoyable for modern gamers, I think about the kinds of experiences players seek today. Many people love games that challenge them, games that test reflexes, games that require learning through failure. Probotector absolutely offers that. But even beyond the difficulty, what surprised me was how fun the core gameplay still is. Running, shooting, jumping, responding to enemies, it feels engaging and energizing, even today. For players who grew up in the NES era, Probotector is a nostalgic flashback to a time when gameplay was king. For younger players who didn't grow up with this hardware, it's an opportunity to experience the roots of run-and-gun design in one of its purest forms. So is NES Probotector still enjoyable for modern gamers? I believe the answer is yes, as long as you approach it with the right expectations. It's fast, demanding, and completely unforgiving, but also sharp, exciting, and incredibly rewarding. It's a game that respects your skill and asks you to rise to the occasion. And for those willing to embrace its retro sensibilities, the experience still hits hard today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Probotector, feel free to hit like, subscribe, and tell me which classic you want me to revisit next. I've got plenty more games and plenty more memories waiting to explore.